I'm trying to try both. So I'm just gonna pop on here. I just wanted to talk about something that it's been interesting to me in the last several years of my life. Actually, I've been kind of exploring this process for a long time, but being in the gym, I just wanted to kind of talk to that feeling that some of us have about feeling crazy around food. Um, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to jump on. I appreciate so much that you guys are jumping on and actually listening to my own personal journey, and also just talking to the people that I know. Some may or may not be struggling with this, and this is a big, huge struggle that I want to be completely open and honest with you. And the one thing I do want to say here is, if you struggle immensely with the psychological side to this, if you feel like you're what is a quote unquote binge eater, you may or may not want to go for therapy. Behavioral therapy is really helpful if you actually can talk about your feelings, and that's helped me tremendously. I never believed that I was a binge eater. I was a problem eater, but then again, I did have problems with feeling crazy around food. So that's why I just want to disclaimer here. I am not a therapist, and I am not here to help you, get through those issues. All I'm here is just to talk anecdotally about what I've experienced, and what I've experienced in the gym with a lot of the women and men that have crossed our paths. It's been hundreds of people that we talk to, and you know what? You're not alone. It's not your fault. But yet again, it partially is. So I just wanted to talk to that piece of it, and why you might feel crazy around some foods, or crazy at times eating. Thanks guys again for jumping on here. This is one thing that's kind of really important to talk about, because you are not a crazy person. What's happening is sometimes, and this is what I've discovered in my own experience and experience with our clients, this is again anecdotally, the research, the people I listen to, the experts, the people that have done a lot of this research on these topics. We tend to kind of identify ourselves as crazy if we have an uncontrollable desire or need. And sometimes that uncontrollable desire and need can be many factors. Physiologically, could be the driver. Emotionally, it could be the driver. But there's quite other things that could be impacting it. So all these things kind of work together. But on the physiologic side, after doing tons and tons of exploration on my own part, I realized that I was not a crazy person. It was my body biologically responding to some driver, some sort of something that was occurring in my life. So as far as women are concerned, you know how we are. We either feel crazy around that time of the month, or maybe we're a mother and we've had pregnancy, and we feel sometimes crazy around food. With pregnancy, we have those cravings, all those things. Those are hormones that are kind of triggering you. So what can happen is, there's many factors, but what can happen, and what I've noticed with myself, sometimes you eat something and you feel different, and you feel kind of not yourself, and you can't stop the momentum of continuing to eat that thing. And it could be a thought, it could be overall emotion that could kind of drive you. But with that thought and emotion, sometimes it happens biologically, that we're triggered to eat more. And so biologically, there are foods out there that are meant to make you want to eat more. Of course, the food industry wants you to eat more. The food industry also wants you to stay eating that. So having a shut-off valve can be difficult, especially if you're under stress, if you're feeling emotional, if you're feeling like if your hormones, especially women, and sometimes a lot of men too, if your hormones are kind of not on balance, all these factors can indicate or impact how you respond to that food. So you can feel like you had a bag of chips, but at the end of the day, that bag of chips is gone, and you go into that tailspin of like, what did I do? Why was I so crazy? I'm on this plan. Why did I do that to myself? I'm only treating myself badly. So we go into that mental space, and then we can either go either way. You can tell yourself that you're a failure. You go into that space, and then because you're a failure, you might as well just go ahead and eat some more chips. Or you're a failure, you might as well punish yourself and go eat chicken, plan food for the next 5 days. You need to punish yourself in the gym, all those other things. Or you could get curious about what it was that triggered the craziness that you're feeling about that food. And so what does that look like? Okay, so let me just tell you from own experience. Okay, so I've talked about this extensively for a lot of people, but if you haven't heard this story, and I'll beat it to a horse, but I had a real big issue with gummy worms, gummy bears, gummy whatever, you name it, Sour Patch, you name it. I had this issue, and I never felt like it was a problem until I realized that I was consuming a whole 2-pound bag of licorice without even realizing I ate it. And was that a binge? Potentially. I'm not going to identify that as, I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to identify that way. I choose not to label it. I choose to kind of identify what it meant for me. And at that moment, I started realizing that after I ate that 2-pound bag of licorice, either before or after, there was a mental breakdown on my part, but there was also a biological breakdown. So I almost like, it's like putting water in your gas tank and expecting yourself to drive down the street. It might go, it might not go, but then what happens is that all those mechanisms are trying really, really hard to run that car, right? And then, so I put water in my gas tank. I didn't put high test, I put like low test. And so my brain went into this overdrive, tried to, okay, we need to figure this out, what's going on. And it impacted me in a way that was amazingly overwhelming. So I had to break it down, and I really had to break it down to the parts of what was triggering me to go back into that space. Why was I continually going to that space, feeling ashamed and shameful, beating myself up? So beating myself up and telling myself that I was a loser because I ate 2-pound bags. Hey, Erica, 2-pound bag of licorice didn't help me get better. So I had to stop and get curious. I had to stop identifying and judging myself for that, and I had to start realizing that the craziness that I was feeling was partially biological and partially emotional. And so what was it? So I had to go back. I'm not talking about therapy. Sometimes it's helpful if you go back to where's that first time you actually experienced that high you got from that food, or the high that you got with that moment. Was it because of what this, that, or the other thing? It helped me, just anecdotally, it helped me. So what I did was I kind of checked back to the time when there was a moment in time where it was really important to me to have those. Well, it was about joy that I felt when I had the gummies. So when did I feel the joy? It was, well, Grandma would come to the house and she would bring these gummies. Now, my mom, amazing. She was really good about teaching us about healthy, all this other stuff. But there were bad things or things that were not brought into the house because she wanted us to be healthy, which is what she should do as a mother. She's teaching us better habits, and that was really good. But there was some level of feeling that, Grandma's coming, we get to have the gummies. And there was no shut-off valve when it came to, when Grandma brought the gummies, it was like, okay, I'd have a couple gummies and that was it. But when Grandma would leave, we wouldn't have those gummies. So every time I felt like FOMO. I'm going to miss out. I'm not going to get these gummies again. Mom's not going to bring them into the house because they're not good for you. So it started that process of biologically driving me towards that. So emotionally, I thought about it. Grandma's coming. I'm going to get the gummies. I get all excited. It's all that, like that overwhelming sense of excitement. And then Grandma would come and like, let me shove as many as I can get into my mouth because I don't know when I'm going to get these again, because I don't know when Grandma's going to come visit. Well, Grandma moved in with us at a point in my life, and Grandma provided those gummies pretty much daily. So it came to a point where I didn't have that shift. There was never a shift in my mind that said, well, grandma's here all the time, you know, like you're fine, you know, you're gonna get these gummies. No, I was feeling a sense of scarcity in my body. My brain went there. So, and it also like, it conjured up these feelings of crazy when I would get around these gummies. It was really like I'd stand over the container and just shove them in. I wouldn't even taste them. Like it got to the point where I didn't even taste these because I felt like, I don't know if I'm gonna get these again. These are, you know, like these bring me joy. All these things would go through my head, and I never really got the connect until I got into ironically, until I got into my 30s and started training in bodybuilding again. Because in bodybuilding, if any of you, like some of you guys have popped on here, and on bodybuilding, there's some level of restriction. And so I was living in a world of restriction, and I absolutely loved the process of it, but I also hated it because I was unfamiliar with what my body was going through, and I wasn't very kind to myself in that process. I would punish myself, all those fun things. So it was either reward or punishment, basically, in my mind when it came to that process. So coming back to that whole gummy story is I would reward myself after my shows with gummies. And it got into this cycle of, you know, and I noticed it was a real big problem. Was it the second show I did, because I couldn't wait. My father-in-law, I love him to death. My mother-in-law and father-in-law, they provided me with a 2-pound bag of gummies, and amazing. They felt that was rewarding me, and I felt like that was rewarding me. The unfortunate part about it is that I consumed that whole 2-pound bag of gummies in the matter of hours, and then I ended up, after consuming a ton of other food, which, you know, that can lead to, you know, like the fact that I had limited myself. So I was in that mindset, scarcity, FOMO, all this other stuff. When I ended my competition, let's reward ourselves with a ton of food. And it was to the point of over consuming the food. I didn't have a shut off valve when it came to it. So was I binging at that time? Yeah, you can honestly say it was a binge, but it was a couple hours of a binge. But those gummies, I literally sat on the bathroom floor, shoving them into my mouth. And I ended up dry heaving into the toilet because I had so much food in my body. That is where a light bulb went off for me. And I realized that, oh my God, that was the craziest thing I could have ever done. And I realized there's something that I need to stop. So granted, moving forward, I realized I needed to get a better understanding of what it was that was making me feel crazy. And so I did a ton of research. I've tons and tons of research. I've listened to podcasts, I've read some books and all this other stuff. And I always felt like, in some sense, I was not crazy. In some sense, it was a moment of biological need. And I'll discuss this later, but when it came to like alcohol or an addiction, it was a biological need. It was something in my mind, all the neurons that said, my brain said, do this, even though I was like, don't do this. It was that bad guy, good guy kind of angel on your shoulder. And how many times I would just listen to well, you deserve this. You worked hard for this, or you're having a bad moment. So I realized when I was feeling stressed or emotional, all this other stuff, the gummies were my go-to. So I would go to the store and I'd buy that 2-pound bag of gummies or licorice or whatever. Hey, Becky. And so that started my process of breaking it down. I had to get curious. What is this that I'm feeling? And why do I feel so crazy around these? And why can't I stop? And so I had to address all the other behaviors I was having around all the foods I was eating, but in particular, this is really kind of poignant for me. My story is one of those ones where it's like, that was my aha moment. When I'm sitting on the bathroom floor, a whole 2 pounds of gummy bears is gone and I'm dry heaving into the toilet. What would make me do that? And why did I not why could I not stop? What was it? Why did I feel so crazy? And why was it so important for me to finish that bag? So breaking it down, of course, dealing with the emotional side and all this other stuff was really helpful for me. But the other key is dealing with the biological side. I was not crazy. There is some aspect of my body needing and wanting those gummy bears. I know, crazy, right? Nutritionally, it doesn't make sense. But what it was making sense to me is that it was a whole biological driver that kept that whole psychological driver going as well. So it was these two factors. So I had to kind of marry the two and kind of drill it down and figure it out. And what helped me is actually talking to other women in our gym and actually talking to them about their own journey, how they felt like, I feel so crazy when I grab a pint of ice cream and I wasn't even hungry. I wasn't even hungry. And I always ask them, so what happened prior to that? What triggered this? What do you feel? And they're like, I felt crazy. I felt crazy. I was shoving it in and not stopping. What was it about that moment that caused you or need that biological need that you couldn't shut the valve off? And so granted, it was partially psychological, but also biological. So when you're feeling low or down, or when you're feeling happy or whatever, your brain goes to, well, this is going to continue that process. I want to keep this feeling. I want to stop this feeling with the low and sad, or I want this feeling to continue. So your brain goes to that one thing. And biologically, your brain will turn on the valve and say, well, don't you remember? This is what we had when we were sad. Don't you remember? This is what we had when we were happy. So let's keep this process going. It's a fight or flight kind of thing. And it seems kind of crazy because it's not driven really by survival, but it is a survival mechanism that goes off in our brains. Neurologically, our brains are always going to what's going to keep us alive. And biologically, that's what happens. So it's a brain-body connection. And how can we link the two together? And when you are feeling stressed, you feel like you're going to die, your brain goes to, how are we going to survive? Okay, and what you've done in the past is going to pop up and say, don't you remember? This is how we survived before. This is how we survived these feelings that we're feeling in our body. So, wow. When I was feeling sad, if I was feeling happy, whatever, it was, let's go to those gummies and let's not stop because you're not sure when you're going to get those again. And that's where I was like, OMG, okay, Jen, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to explore this? So I had to, and I don't always, like how I did it was really important for me, but how I speak to a lot of women too is, okay, let's explore the feelings behind why you're feeling a need to overconsume this stuff. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, because you can overconsume healthy food as well. Why are you overconsuming? And what is that feeling that you're getting? What is the thought and then the feeling that's making you act not in the manner that you would like to act? What is making you act kind of almost, you feel crazy. And I don't want to identify anyone as crazy. There's no craziness about it. Sorry. So, sorry, my mom's trying to call me, of course. But so I don't want to let you know that being crazy is not it. Sometimes it's a biological thing that's happening in our body. So again, I'm not the expert. I choose to go out and research it. I will give you a bunch of, if you want to, I'll give you a bunch of resources that you can go to. Quite a few podcasts, all this other stuff. But by exploring getting healthy with food has helped me get healthy with my brain, my body, and myself. So, all right, so that biological need. So when I'm talking to these other women, I'm like, you're preaching to the choir here. I know what you're talking about. Like certain times of the month, we feel stressed, so we go for that food. So I started putting the pieces together and realizing that if I didn't put those pieces together, I was still going to struggle. So I had to get curious. I got a little uncomfortable about it. I had to, again, I wanted to. This was something, as it was a mission of mine. If I could figure this out for myself, I can have that conversation with others. And everyone's different on how they kind of go through their process. But what helped me identify it was the fact that I had to identify what was it that thought that hit my head before I actually went and did the journey. What was it? What was it that thought? What started it? And then what was the action that I took because of it? What was I feeling? The thought, the feeling, and then the action that I took. So what helped me was just letting it happen. And instead of unconsciously eating, being aware of what it felt like in those moments and why I felt so uncontrollable and crazy, and what it was that triggered that uncontrollable crazy in the first place. So again, so when you're under a ton of stress, and stress could be good. It could be something like you're getting a new job, or you're moving to a new house, or you're getting promoted, or you're starting a new journey, and that still causes stress in your life. And that's normal that your body's going to react. Red flag, red flag, red flag. How do we deal with stress? How do we shut this down? How do we turn this off? Biologically, your body will respond, and you will kind of go for whatever is going to make that feeling go away or make that feeling better. So seeing the biological side didn't make it go away for me. I had to go through the habit of changing it and being aware of it and not shaming myself for it. That's one thing I encourage a lot of women, a lot of men. If you feel shame around a habit that you have that's not serving your overall goals, if you're feeling shame about the fact that you're eating all the icing off the cake every single time and there's no need for it, and you're not hungry for it, but you just seem to every single time that icing, that big thick icing, and you just keep eating it, if you're unconsciously doing it, I encourage you to be aware and wake up. And wake up to what it is that's triggering this behavior that you're feeling crazy about. And food is not the enemy. There are certain foods out there that are not going to benefit you, for absolutely sure. And there are foods out there that the food industry has created so that you will have a biological driver turning it on. So there's a lot of things. There's alcohol can do this as well. Obviously, there's times where you're like, I just want to relieve some stress. So you believe in your mind that alcohol is the one that's relieving the stress. But honestly, in the long run, it could be actually causing you more stress because maybe you're gaining weight, you're eating things you don't want to eat, all this other stuff. So it's all those things. I always say to people, is this your gateway drug? To me, gummies were my gateway drug. It opened up the Pandora's box and said, Jen, this is how you're going to deal with it, versus understanding what it was that was the driver behind my behavior and understanding where it started. So I kind of pinpoint, where did it start? Okay, cool. I know. I don't think you have to always do that, but sometimes it's helpful because then you can actually kind of logically go through the process. And now it becomes less of a biological, the more you can feel that biology. And what has helped me, and I'm not telling you to eat a certain way or all this other stuff, but what has helped me tremendously is eating the foods that are going to nourish my brain enough that when I have those moments of stress, that I'm able to maneuver through them a lot better than when I wasn't feeding myself nutrient dense, highly nutrient dense foods, just healthier foods for me. And not everyone has the same level of what nutrients they need. So that's always like kind of exploring what's going to help me kind of, surf through this feeling. What's going to help? So what I found anecdotally from the clients that I deal with on a daily basis, especially people who come in that are like, they're not regular exercises, or they've gone off track, or maybe they're, they kind of were an athlete and they just kind of don't even know how to get back to it. So we sit down and talk about what was the driver behind you quitting your routine, or the driver behind you not wanting to do the routine, and talk those things through. And then how do you eat? And I have to say to you, 9 times out of 10, majority of the people that have a really hard time kind of getting that on the right track when it comes to eating is they disvalue the foods that they're putting in their body enough that they're not seeing the links between what they're putting in their body versus how they're feeling and how they're feeling crazy around food. So what has helped? Protein. Protein has really, it's kind of like, I think Dr. Jade Teta, I love him, and if ever you go out there, he's one that kind of opened my eyes to this, because prior to that, I knew that when I ate more protein, I felt better, but when I started really drilling it down and understanding that protein was kind of like, he calls it like the hormone stabilizer. It helped stabilize my biology enough that I had the muscles to kind of fight through the feelings that was triggering me to want to go crazy over a food. It opened my mind. It created an awareness enough that I was able to kind of surf through it and be consciously aware of what was triggering the biological need to eat a certain food. So it took time, for sure. It takes being aware of it. It takes noticing those moments. And you're never going to be perfect about it, absolutely. But so that's what I encourage a lot of our clients to do. And once they start noticing, yeah, when I start eating, I'm getting off track and I'm paying attention to how much protein I'm eating, I actually feel more stable. I feel, you feel that sense of a little more control. And I'm not telling you to have to be a control freak. I'm just saying it helps with that whole mind-body, biologic, neurologic connection that we're not ever associating with that crazy feeling. Because crazy can feel, mentally it can feel, but physically it can feel crazy. So those two do work together. So how did that happen? So I helped kind of regulate those proteins. How most of our clients, we emphasize, go for the protein. Let's focus in on how much protein are you truly getting? Are you sustaining it, and are you filling your body up? That's helpful. Now, and then filling in the gaps with the other two, which is your carbs and your fats. And I have to be honest, I've gone back and forth between how many carbs do I have, do I go low fat, all those other things. I'm not going to talk about that here, but obviously it's helpful if you can explore what's going to help you get the results you want. And if you're looking for stability when it comes to your mental processes, I've found you have to explore what's going to balance you enough to feel the energy, the excitement of life, and give you the strength to live your life at your best. And you'll notice, there's quite a few people that once they start kind of noticing what they're putting in their body, they start to feel like, oh, when they put something that wasn't necessarily within, like what's going to help them, they start realizing, wow, I ate this and I reacted so crazy, or I acted very like over the top, and they start connecting the dots. The key is that if you can connect the dots between, okay, so I had a really horrible moment. What happened? Story to tell you. I absolutely love my mother-in-law. She passed away 2 years ago from lung cancer, and she loved sugar. She would eat Danishes, and that was all she would eat all day long. And then she would eat pretzels and Diet Pepsi for lunch, or not even eat that. And she kept she looked lean. She's skinny, but in the long run, it affected her physiologically. It affected her moods. It was challenging to kind of encourage her to understand that I know physiologically it was helpful to get her energy, but it affected a lot of things. And in the long run, even though at the weight she was when she died, which a lot of you, I know, you might be searching for that perfect weight or that perfect thing in your life, she was at the lowest weight she'd ever been, but she had cancer and she was dying. I don't encourage you to focus just on the food and the weight that way. I encourage you to focus in on how you're feeling. So granted, we talk about weight loss in the gym. We absolutely talk about that. But if you're feeling crazy around these foods, then maybe you need to kind of identify, why do I feel crazy first, to feel better, because in the long run, once you start honing in on those moments of what's triggering me, what's happening here, what's all this other stuff, healing that part of you is going to give you the end result of releasing the weight, or getting to the healthy weight that your body is ready for. And it's also helpful to kind of clear your brain. It gives you brain stability. It makes you feel like, wow, I didn't realize how off balance you feel. So pinpointing those moments when you feel crazy, don't shame yourself, but get curious about what's happening in your body and mind, and what triggered that moment will help you. So think, feel, act is one thing, one of and I apologize, I don't I've listened to a bunch of podcasts, but and I agree with it. So sometimes we think a thought, we feel a feeling, and then we act on it. So the behavior that we are driven. So the feeling that you're feeling is oftentimes biological. You'll feel it in your soul. You'll feel that burn in your stomach. And if you can't connect the two, oftentimes we go through life not realizing that we're being driven biologically, but our thoughts are the ones that triggered this biology. So I've posted on my page on Facebook here. I posted on my Instagram here about your words have power, and you're giving them power if you're not able to dissect what power you've given them and start realizing that the more you can speak on the energetically positive side to yourself and figure out that your body is reacting to environmental aspects, and if you can break it down into those parts. So again, think, feel, act. Go back dig into deep. What is triggering me to feel this way? What is triggering me to feel crazy around food? How you want to hide in the bathroom because, oh my God, there's cake on the counter. And how when you take home that piece of cake, you're like, oh, I'm just saving it for later. I was really good at and then all of a sudden something happens, and that cake that's sitting on the counter, it disappears in 10 seconds, and you didn't taste it. You don't know what triggered it. What happened? You unconsciously consumed it. And that's not necessarily your fault. Something could have triggered that thought in your head. The biology kicked in, and you just acted on it. So the key for you, if you're feeling like this is out of control for you, if you feel like this is happening more often than not, then I do encourage you to go sit down and talk to somebody. A therapist is really helpful with that, and digging deep. But if you feel like, okay, can I manage this? It's not all the time, it just seems to be sometimes, then I encourage you to kind of dig deep into what it is that's triggering you and write those moments down. It takes some time and effort, but if you want this, you will absolutely do it for you, because it's important for your future, for the long haul, for the long game, for the long period. You don't want to be at the age of 75 still struggling with your fact that you can't stop eating a piece of cake. You want to say to yourself that I didn't have to eat the whole cake. I had one slice of cake. Because in the long run, eating that whole cake is going to impact your body physiologically. You may gain weight. You may get disease, all this other stuff. But if you can, go down into the factor that the kind of what's the trigger that keeps me shoving it into my mouth, how can I, drill it down? What are the key factors that I know? There's certain things. I choose to, at this moment, never to have gummies again. I just know that that's something that if I reintroduce into my life, that's my choice. But there are other things that I know that I've overeaten, that I've kind of overconsumed, that I can actually eat now, but I'm aware of okay, Jen, you might want to step away from that food a little more often than not, probably not have it as much as you were having it. But that's taken time and effort, and I will tell you it's not perfect, because you will have moments where it's going to come back to you. So I encourage you guys today, it's not about perfection. I encourage you to kind of, if you feel like you're feeling crazy around food, you feel like this uncontrollable need around a certain food, just one food, pick one food that it's like, I just can't not have it, then I encourage you to explore the reasoning behind that food. what started this process? Where does it come from? And then start getting curious of what's triggering it. Is it joy? Is it sadness? Is it stress? Because it can be all of the above. Explore those parts that are kind of keeping you feeling that anxiousness and uncontrollable feeling, and start breaking it down into what it is that's causing this need, undesirable biological need, that could be hindering you and making you feel less than. Look, guys, you guys are all perfect human beings the way you are. If you can understand that about yourself, we are perfectly imperfect. We are human beings. We are on this earth, and you do have a purpose. And your purpose is to explore how you can be your best. And if you're not feeling as if you're being your best by being this crazy person eating a whole cake or pie or 2-pound bag of gummies, then I encourage you to explore what it is that can help you be that person that you know you are. Deep inside, we are all perfectly who we should be at that moment. Give yourself a break. Have compassion for that person that's eating that 2-pound bag of gummies. Understand that she or he may be struggling with something that maybe you need to talk to somebody about, or maybe you need to kind of explore for yourself. But again, having those conversations, you're not crazy. You are absolutely not crazy. You are just going through something, and the more you can struggle and break it down to for you, that's really what's most important. So if you guys like this video, if you really found you got something out of it, if this resonates with you, if you feel like there's somebody that would benefit this, I encourage you to share this. Comment below. I really appreciate all of you guys jumping on board at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday, hump day. Again, these conversations are going to keep going. You know, Mike and I will be jumping on here. We'll be talking about how this can impact, when you're feeling crazy, how it can impact your relationships. Because if your partner feels crazy and you feel like they're acting crazy, it's good to understand what it is that's triggering them and how you can manage with them, and encourage them to dig deep into that process. But again, if you're feeling like this is so out of control, this is on a regular basis, this is happening more often than you'd like, then I do encourage you to go get some help. Talk to somebody, a professional, that can kind of drill down what it is that's causing you to feel so much shame and so much angst about a particular food or foods in general. So thanks, guys. Again, share this if you can. I appreciate all of you guys so much. I'll be jumping on here more often. Post down here if there's something else you want to talk about. I would love to talk about it. Again, I don't have all the answers, but I'm just telling you from my own personal experience and the experience I've had in our gym with the women and men that I have actually worked with over the years. And it's been over 12, 13 years that I've kind of exploring this with other people. Myself, I've been on this journey for more than 25 years. Actually, when I was 12, so I don't even put the numbers together. Anyways, so I've been exploring this since I was 12 years old, trying to figure it out for myself and going through my own life journey. So thanks for coming on board. Hope you guys have a fantastic Wednesday, and post your comments right here. Thanks so much.